small amounts too, and maybe have some water available. I think if you did let it in the salad or something as an accent, it works out quite well. But it certainly makes the lotus tuber more flavorful.
Yeah. Wow. Those, but I liked it. Once I could talk again. It's really not that spicy. I'm pretty much a wimp on spices, but I like them in small quantities. That's an interesting combination. It doesn't taste. It tastes like a different spice combination than I'm used to with Chinese food. It'd be interesting to look at which spices are in it. And again, Bergen Water Gardens is going to feature the Lotus next weekend, for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And you might want to take some photos. Larry was saying that they're going to be open earlier than usual Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, more like 8 o'clock rather than 10 o'clock. So you can catch the Lotus to get some photos. And the flowers are huge. Are the petals edible? Do they eat the petals in China?
Certainly they do. They'll make tea out of them, of course, but you can also mix them in with various soups and be consumed. Again, my palate isn't quite refined to be able to distinguish between different varieties, but there are some very popular dishes made with lotus petals.
I would guess that they have a little bit of texture to them. I think of yucca flowers. I don't know if you've ever eaten those. Those have almost like a cucumber crunch to them. The lotus maybe is a thinner petal and just more like eating a pansy or a nasturtium or something.
Well, it's interesting. Not only the petals themselves, but various people are making products, not only in China, but in Korea and in Thailand. And lotus pollen also is used as an additive. So I haven't quite figured that out. But while I was in China, one of my good friends from Thailand brought a sample of her new product, which is lotus juice. And it's tremendous. And I'm trying to figure out a way to import it. Except, importing water from Thailand is pretty expensive to do, even though this is lotus juice.
You need juice concentrate or something to import. What's the juice from? The root again?
Yeah, the juice is from the root, and I think actually from the stems. She wasn't real specific with me, but they do add some other fructose, so it gets a little bit sweeter. And it was actually a delightful combination. It's kind of hard to describe. I only had like a half a bottle of it, and that was a couple weeks ago. But I do know that if it's cold, it was very tasty. And if I had a refridge of it here sitting at Bergen Water Gardens, I'm sure folks would enjoy it.
And who knows? There's another year or two, maybe you get that in. Just bringing in the lotus tubers themselves, though, a lot of regulatory loopholes to go through to get them through. To get living plant material in general to import that, isn't it?
Yeah, there are certainly restrictions and guidelines, rules that you have to follow, but most of the work's actually done in China. If all the soil is removed and they're cleaned and they're dipped in the appropriate chemicals, they get the inspection, then they arrive in JFK, but they already had their phytosanitary certificate, so the work's been done in China, and luckily, knock on wood, 5 years out of 5 years we've been able to get our plant material in. Not only the lotus, but the carnivorous plants, the nepenthes, and everything's coming quite well. And we like to air freight it. It's a little bit more expensive, but we use China Southern Airlines, and it's a direct flight into JFK. And so you're only talking 15 hours in the air. And they come in great. The guys handled the boxes well. We get minimal breakage, and it's been a successful venture.
I don't know if we should talk about carnivorous plants during a food show, but you're carrying more of them, and if someone wants some carnivorous plants because they're kind of cool to watch and just see them capture these insects, you don't really need to feed them insects. It's not like you've got to go buy insects to feed your carnivorous plants, right? They do pretty well on their own finding insects, and just I'm not sure they actually need the insects to live. Maybe to grow larger, to what are the requirements?
Well, generally carnivorous plants, the American pitcher plants, Venus flytrap, grow in a peat bog, so it's pretty much nutrient poor. So by catching insects, they do, and digesting them, they do get some necessary fertilizer, food, if you will, and the plants do much better. The problem is up on the internet, you'll read stories about people feeding their Venus flytrap hamburger. Please don't do that. That doesn't work at all for the poor plant. There's some research that's been done. It's really fascinating on the mechanism. I mean, this goes all the way back to Darwin. He just wrote about it because he couldn't believe it. There were plants that ate animals as well, insects.
Right.
And so it was quite interesting. But I think they just measured the pH, and it gets down to 2.0 when that Venus flytrap closes up and seals. It releases the digestive juices. I mean, it's a pretty good pH, and it breaks everything down. But when you look at the tropical nepenthes, yeah, insects go in there, they drown. There's another instance where there's a plant that produces nectar. A tree shrew sits on it, licks off the nectar, and tends to defecate, so it gets its nutrients that way from actually the excrement of the shrew. But there's also been documentation, and we haven't had it happen yet, but where small mice and small rats will actually drown in the pitcher, and it's fair game to, again, not on a food show, I'm sorry for doing that, but it's
Fair game, yeah. For the carnivorous plants, yeah, it's the size of them. People may not realize how big these pitchers are, right?
Oh yeah, some of the American pitcher plants will get 36 inches, but they got very narrow tubes, so they're constrained to bugs. But these other guys that consume some other animals, they can hold like a liter of fluid. I mean, you're talking something that's 12, 14, 16 inches tall and 8, 9 inches in diameter. So you're talking a very large mechanism here.